Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Cannon. I'm the Associate Director for Engagement in the Center for Career Development at Holy Cross. And we're here today to talk about case style interviews. So case style interviewing is becoming increasingly common, particularly for those interested in the business, consulting, and finance industries, but there are lots of industries that are utilizing it. Interviewing itself is stressful enough, but I think case style interviews can be particularly nerve-wracking for students and alumni alike. So what can students expect in a case style interview, and how can they go about preparing? So today, I'm joined by Courtney Quinn, Holy Cross class of 1996, and Vice President for Brand Strategy at Liberty Mutual, who's going to help us answer some of those questions. So thanks for joining me today, Courtney. To start, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and then your experience with case style interviews.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be able to get back into the Holy Cross universe and hopefully provide some value. So I started my career out of Holy Cross doing market research and consulting. And after a few years realized I wanted to get more into a consumer marketing space. So went back to get my MBA at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And that's really where I was exposed to case questions. So most of the marketing companies that were coming to campus had some degree of case questions. Other industries who were common were consulting, investment banking, and the like. Some of the development programs as well used them. I became very familiar in terms of preparing for my marketing interviews, the more consumer packaged goods companies. And so I had the benefit of all of the students who had gone before me collecting the questions that had been asked. There's a healthy list of questions that I took from my time at UNC, which I'll be happy to share with you for folks to be able to practice. But we just did a lot of practicing. So I ended up getting an internship at Kraft Foods and then getting a full-time offer there. So after I graduated with my MBA, I went to the Nabisco headquarters as part of what was then Kraft Foods. And then I was on the other side of the table doing case interviews and being able to think about what I wanted to hear and what we were looking for from candidates. I've since moved to Liberty Mutual, where I've been for more than 10 years in a variety of roles. We do some case interviewing, usually for our rotational programs, and maybe not as heavily as other companies do, but I have lots of fond recollections from my case question days. So occasionally, if I'm interviewing a candidate, I'll throw one in just for fun to see how they answer.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. So given kind of all the experience you have with this, what would you say big picture students can expect when it comes to this style of interviewing or this style of questioning? And from the employer side, which you've been on, what are employers looking for?
So in my experience, it's rare for an entire interview to be dominated with case questions. You're still going to have the opportunity to tell your story and be able to walk through your experience and to kind of talk about what you're looking for. So oftentimes that can be a nice way to get comfortable in the conversation and kind of establish a level of comfort so that you're not thrown off. There are companies who are looking to throw you off as part of the process, a little psychological warfare. But my experience, and again, that's very much influenced by how consumer packaged goods companies do case interviewing. Usually started with resume walk and then a few open behavioral questions talking about experience, and then launched right into it. One of the interesting things I think that it's important to be aware of is whatever you put on your resume is fodder for a potential case question. As I recall, when I was interviewing for the Kraft internship, I had written that I like to golf. And so the whole case question was, you're the brand manager for Nike Golf, and then just rattled off. So I encourage you to be aware of that as you put your interests on your resume, because that could end up being the starting point of a case question.
Awesome. So that adds a layer of stress.
It does, although, assuming that it happens, presumably you're better equipped to handle it. Although I was the brand manager of Nike Golf, I wasn't being asked to play golf. I was being asked to think about selling golf clubs, which was not an interest that I had listed on my resume.
Sure. Wow. So kind of on the flip side of that, what do you recommend for students and alumni as well in terms of going about preparing for this style of interview?
I think when I think about when I was sitting on the employer side of the desk, really what you're looking for, there are rarely right answers in a case question. In some case questions there are, or there is a sort of a range that you need to get into. But for the types of questions that we were asking, I'm seeking to understand what your thought process is. How are you approaching this challenge? What are some of the questions that you're going to ask me? I think one sort of tactical point to remember is you're going to want lots more information that than they're going to give you in the question. Beware of asking too many questions. One or two clarifying questions about what they've asked you is totally appropriate and sometimes can be a way to show part of your thought process. But if you pepper the interviewer with questions about the question, they're going to get frustrated. But really, we're just looking to understand, how do you approach the question? How do you think about it? In the consumer marketing space, we're looking for creativity matched with a degree of good, solid business sense. So, in the example that I gave about, you're the brand manager of Nike Golf, it was about a supply chain issue. I was being told I didn't have the materials to make the product that I wanted, and what was I going to do to not sacrifice, the launch that I had been planning. So it was less about, there's a million ways you could answer that question, but are you being thoughtful, thinking through the issues, and maybe being a little bit creative, and maybe being a little risky? Don't be afraid to say what you think might be a controversial answer, because in the end, that might be the best answer out there.
How fortuitous to do an interview about supply chain issues.
I know, right? Thankfully, I'm no longer in the industry of, tangible products, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But yeah, it's timely.
Awesome. So again, what final words of wisdom would you have for students and alumni too, with case style interviews and the process in general?
Practice, practice, practice. The best things that we did back at UNC was we would just have mock interview sessions, and we would again, we've got a list of, call it 50, 75 questions, and we would just go through and ask. We would make variations on the questions because we all had the same list that we were working from. And so if I was mock interviewing a classmate, I would tweak it. I would change it. So it wouldn't be the brand manager of Nike Golf. It would be, you're the brand manager of Honey Bunches of Oats and you can't get almonds. And so now what are you going to do? So I think being creative, thinking of your own questions, but really practicing. I think on the employer side, I want to see that you're having fun with it. I'm not there to watch you sweat. Again, some companies might be, but I want to see that you're engaged and enthusiastic, because that shows me that you're going to be engaged and enthusiastic about the business problems I'm going to be asking you to solve when you're an employee. So if you can, it's a tall order because interviews are nerve-wracking anyway, and case interviews are especially so. But to the extent that you can feel centered, comfortable, calm, but kind of excited to take on the challenge and think about it, that sends as much of a message as what you might answer in the answer itself. And again, going back to, it's really about the thought process. So, and oftentimes, and this is another sort of tactical recommendation, verbalize your thought process. For no other reason that it's super awkward for the interview to sit there while you silently work it out in your head minute after minute. Like, nobody wants that. So talk about it. Talk about, how you're thinking about it. And some of the consulting firms I know like to use very math-oriented case studies. So jot it down on a piece of paper, but as you're jotting it down, say, okay, well, if I assume, the one people talk about is how many golf balls can fit in a 747. So, okay, I'm going to assume that every golf ball is 2 inches, in diameter, and et cetera, but you're walking through your thought process. You might make wrong assumptions in there, but the answer you get to, you will at least have shared with your interviewer how you got there. And that's a really important part of it.
Well, that's great. I've certainly learned a lot today. So Courtney, thank you for your time. I hope everybody's found this as valuable as I have. And thank you for plugging additional resources. I think the Center for Career Development is here for folks to do those mock interviews. We're working on updating our documents in order to reflect case style interviewing a little bit better. And then also our alumni are a great resource in this area too. So Hogan 203 for the CCD, and then LinkedIn and HC Network to connect with alumni.
And connect with me. You know, if you've got a case interview coming up and you want to bat it around, I'm open.
So Courtney, thanks again for your time, and thanks to everybody for watching this video, and have a great day.